The third season of Doctor Who was shown on BBC One between the 11th of September 1965 and the 16th of July 1966. It starred William Hartnell once again as the First Doctor and had a record number of companions throughout the season, with Vicky Pallister, Stephen Taylor, Katarina, Sarah Kingdom, Dodo Chaplet, Polly Wright and Ben Jackson. This was the first season of records for the show, as it had both the shortest serial, Mission to the Unknown, and the longest, The Daleks' Master Plan. Behind the scenes, it was also a tad chaotic. Verity Lambert left to be replaced by John Wiles, then Innes Lloyd, and William Hartnell was also in the process of being replaced due to his failing health, despite the fact that the show was actually at its height of popularity. Due to the BBC junking policies, only 3 of the 10 serials are complete. It is Hartnell's most incomplete season, with 28 out of 45 episodes missing. Galaxy 4. Galaxy 4 is the first serial of Season 3 and is mostly missing, with only 1 episode existing to this day. The third episode was the most viewed episode of Doctor Who up until The Three Doctors in 1973. In 2021, the story was fully animated in both colour and black and white. The animated version was the one I watched. It is made up of 4 25-minute episodes written by William Eames, directed by Derek Martinez and produced by Verity Lambert. Mervyn Pinfield was due to redirect this serial but had to be replaced after he fell ill and later died in 1966. There was a lot of tension behind the scenes for this one. John Wiles, who was to replace Verity Lambert as producer, got into an argument with both William Hartnell and Maureen O'Brien over the scripts. He threatened to fire Hartnell and refused to renew O'Brien's contract, causing her to leave in The Mythmakers.
Yes, a very intelligent, highly intelligent life to build machines like that.
Chumley.
Well, Chumley, if you like, my child.
The Doctor, Vicky and Stephen land on a barren planet which seems to be able to hold life, but just doesn't. When investigating, Vicky finds a blind machine she names a Chumley. After the Chumley has attempted to get the gang to follow it, Stephen tries to attack it and the machine shoots a nearby plant. A group of women come out and save the gang from the Chumley, introducing themselves as the Dravens. They explain that the Chumleys are controlled by the evil race known as the Rills. After taking the gang back to their base, the gang find that the Dravens are powerful warrior women who use men only for hunting. They were trapped on the planet after their ship crashed and were subsequently told that the planet was due to explode in 14 days. The Doctor convinces them that he should go and investigate the planet, but the Dravens insist on keeping one of the gang with them. Vicky therefore stays, and the Doctor discovers that the ship that the planet is on only has 2 days before it explodes, not the 14 originally thought. When the Doctor gets back to the base, Vicky and Stephen swap, and the Doctor and Vicky go try contact the Rills, with Stephen trying to create chaos back at the Draven base. The Doctor investigates the Rill base and finds that even though they are scary looking, they are actually quite kind, offering the Dravens escape even though the Dravens want to wipe them out. The Dravens have Stephen trapped in an airlock and are threatening to take away the oxygen and let him die if he does not do what they want him to. The Rills warn the Doctor of what is happening to Stephen, and they rush back to save him just in time. The Doctor fixes the Rill ship and they flee, leaving the Dravens alone on the planet after the gang leaves themselves. The planet explodes, destroying the Draven soldiers.
We can empty the oxygen out of that section and you will suffocate.
Galaxy 4 is one of those stories that I personally think is a completely middle-of-the-road Doctor Who story. Now, don't get me wrong, I like it, but it's not extraordinary and it's not really, really bad either. It's essentially just there. I appreciate that sometimes because I have watched some really bad Doctor Who stories in my life, but this one just sort of exists. I watched the animated version, which was released in late 2020 or early 2021, I believe. I found the animation a little bit different from the previous animated serials. It was a bit more jankier and I don't know, felt a little bit more rushed, but still it was a lot better than obviously not having any episode at all. I also watched it in colour, which was really, really nice. I really liked the addition of the colour versions of those serials coming out with the animations too. And not that I don't like black and white, but I think it just adds something a little bit special to it. As for the politics or the thought behind that particular serial, I can appreciate it, I think. I don't think it was parable or whatever on the dangers of feminism being more powerful in society, but I rather take my own personal view on it. I can see why people might think about it in that respect, but Personally, I like looking at it from the view of penises can be deceiving and that kind of thing, because you look at it and quite a lot of the story is, okay, the Dravens are telling us lies, is the Rills that are the good ones, and because they are very, very ugly, trusting and that sort of thing, the penises, but also the fact that the Dravens very, very quickly establish themselves as the bad guys by their behaviour more than anything, their militantness and their strictness, and how appearances could welcome you in, but also it's your behaviour that you need to watch out by, not by what you can just see. Which is what I appreciated in that story. The whole idea of a ticking time bomb of a planet and two camps, and you've got to try, it's like capture the flag almost. That's, I think, why I can appreciate this serial quite a lot for what it could do. Mission to the Unknown. The second serial of Season 3 came in the unique form of a single Doctorless episode named Mission to the Unknown. It is the only television story not to feature either the Doctor, any companions, or the TARDIS. It was written by Terry Nation, directed by Derek Martinez, and served as a prologue to the long serial later in the series, The Daleks' Master Plan. This was also the last serial in which Verity Lambert produced. This 25-minute episode is completely missing, like most of this season. However, it was frame by frame recreated by a number of students, graduates and staff at the University of Lancashire. It is free to view on YouTube, and I shall link it down below. It was this production that I watched the story through, and I would highly recommend it. The story was inserted to make up for the previous lack of episode 4 for Planet of the Giants. It was also written as a sort of pilot episode in an attempt from Terry Nation to create a Daleks TV series that was separate from Doctor Who itself. This programme would have followed the Space Security Service, of which the main character in the episode is a part of, whose main job was to hunt Daleks. This idea has been expanded upon in a number of short stories and comics written in the 60s at the same time. This pilot for the series, dubbed The Destroyers, was written but never picked up.
I never wanted to touch down this lousy planet in the first place, remember?
Let's not start that again. Just get on with the job, would you?
The main focus of this episode is on the Space Security Service agent Mark Corey, played by Edward D'Souza, and featured Barry Jackson as Jeff Garvey and Jeremy Rung as Gordon Lowry. Corey and Lowry are trapped on the planet Kemble and are trying to fix their damaged ship. Their third member, Garvey, has been taken over by a plant native to this planet and sneaks up behind Corey in an attempt to kill him, but he gets shot before he gets the chance. After he dies, he begins to morph into the plant that infected him. Corey then reveals to his only surviving crewmate that he is a space security agent, investigating information that the Daleks have taken over Kemble and are using it as a base in order to invade the rest of the universe. The plant that infected Garvey is native to Skaro, the Daleks' home planet, which confirms his suspicions. The Daleks, realising there's humans on the planet Kemble, send out a force to get rid of them, but before they can reach him, Lowry gets attacked by the Varga plant. Corey kills him before he can turn into a live plant, and then uses the rescue beacon to transmit an SOS and inform someone of the Dalek plan. The Daleks find him, and he dies with the Daleks celebrating. However, the message has managed to be transmitted into the stars. Mission to the Unknown was very interesting in terms of Doctor Who. There's been lots and lots of Doctor-like episodes throughout the seasons and series, but this is the first time that literally nothing to do with the Doctor was mentioned except a villain. So the Daleks are in this, and that's probably the only connection that you have to Doctor Who, which makes sense because they were trying to use this as interest for Terry Nation's Dalek spin-off. Obviously that didn't work out, so instead of it being its own thing, it's got that tie to Doctor Who through the villain. The concept of the Space Security Service is very, very interesting and unique for that time. Obviously, there's been quite a lot of media and that kind of riffs off that idea. For the time it was at, it was very, very interesting and fascinating to see how they were going to try and spin that off. Hopefully in the future I am going to be able to get a copy of the audio adaptation of the original script by Terry Nation for the spin-off and kind of see how that compares. As for the actual episode, it was very short, very quick and kind of very snappy. There's not really anything major. It's essentially just a prequel. One of those little clips at the start to kind of get a little bit more background. On the whole, I thought the version that I watched, which was the recreation by the university, was absolutely great. They did an absolutely brilliant job at just capturing the mannerisms of how TV was produced at that time. So obviously you've got the stilted stage acting rather than television acting, which is what we kind of expect now. The way it was filmed, kind of all in one go, the effects, the costumes, the scene for scene recreations of that story was absolutely fascinating. So even if I would highly recommend people to watch this recreation, just because it's just a fascinating look into how TV was produced at the time and how it can be recreated now, especially if it's a passion project like it clearly was for those university students and lecturers. Mission to the Unknown, I enjoyed watching it. Even if it wasn't for just the story, I enjoyed watching it, but for what it was symbolically and what all came together in the end. The Mythmakers. The Mythmakers is the third serial of Season 3 and consisted of 4 25-minute episodes. It was written by Donald Cotton, directed by Michael Leiston Smith, and produced by John Wiles. All 4 episodes are currently missing, and so I listened to the narration and audio together. This serial was one of the least documented serials to exist at all, with a lack of telesnaps and photos from the set. It was the very last episode to feature Maureen O'Brien as Vicky, and she was replaced by Adrienne Hill as Katerina.
Vicky, she's all right. I know she is. She's gone to find Troilus, and she'll be quite all right. This is just what she wanted.
The TARDIS arrives in the middle of a battle between 2 great warriors, Achilles and Hector. When Hector is distracted by the Doctor coming out of the blue box, Achilles kills him and assumes that the Doctor is Zeus coming to save him. When they return to the Greek camp, everyone, including a very grumpy Odysseus, believes him to be a Trojan spy instead. Turns out they have landed in the middle of the Trojan War. Stephen, seeing the Doctor be taken away, follows him into the Greek camp, while Vicky stays behind. Inevitably, Stephen gets captured by the Greeks and reunited with the Doctor, who is trying to convince Odysseus not to kill them. But if they do, they should only do it in the temple they arrived in. When they return to where the TARDIS was, they find it missing. Turns out it has been taken into Troy with Vicky inside of it. When Vicky is discovered, she is met with accusations of being a Greek spy, as well as the shouting of Cassandra, which surprisingly everyone ignores. However, she is very quickly welcomed into King Priam's family with the thought that she is a seer. Priam renames her Cressida, and she becomes a close friend of Troilus. Stephen, having convinced the Greeks to try and let him rescue Vicky, sneaks in wearing a guard's uniform and gets them both captured. Priam says that she has to allow them to win the war or else she will be killed. Unfortunately, the Doctor has the very same bargain back with the Greeks. Out of options and running out of time, the Doctor suggests a wooden horse to help them win the war. The next morning, Vicky is released, with Priam celebrating her winning the war for them. The Greeks had well gone, you see, and the only thing that had been left was a wooden horse as a tribute to the gods. Vicky, well aware of how the myth goes, tries to tell Priam what is going on, but he ignores her in her celebrations. She tries to free Stephen, but is seen by Cassandra, who tells her handmaiden, Katerina, to follow them. Chaos ensues when the Greeks burst out of the wooden horse with the Doctor among them. Vicky manages to get Stephen out where he meets with Katerina, and Vicky slips away to try and get Troilus out of the city before it's too late. Troy unfortunately is razed to the ground, but Vicky tries to stay with Troilus to rebuild, while Stephen and Katerina escape with the Doctor and the TARDIS. Fun fact, the episode titles Dennis Spooner came up with originally were supposed to be puns, Zeus es Machina, and Is there a Doctor in this horse? Both of these were vetoed by the BBC. Spoil sports.
But there's nothing left.
Yes, there is. There's us. We can start again with your cousin's help. We can build another Troy.
The Mythmakers was another one that was completely missing. Like most of Season 3 has been completely missing, and that's no different with the Mythmakers. However, the difference here is that there's basically no stills. So what happens with Galaxy 4, for example, and Mission to the Unknown, and all the other kind of ones that are lost, a lot of them have screen caps. So it's basically parts of the screen that have been taken a picture of to kind of demonstrate the director's skills or the actor's skills and record what they were doing at the time. The Mythmakers is one of those ones that do not have this at all. So all essentially we have from this story is anecdotal stories. All that survives is the audio, and the script is used to fill in the blanks in between. Up until this point, I admittedly wasn't entirely enjoying the audio narrations. If I could get the animations, I would watch them instead. Mainly because I didn't find that the audio narrations really worked as well, just for me personally. I think that might be different for everybody, but for me personally, the audio narrations just didn't kind of hold the flame to being able to watch it. And I think this was the first story that I actually enjoyed listening to. I think also probably has stuff to do with the fact that previous episodes or serials that were missing weren't exactly concepts or stories that held my attention or that I enjoyed, but The Mythmakers was great, and it really showed Vicky as a strong character and how she decided to leave, which I wasn't entirely pleased with how she decided to leave, just packing it all in at the last minute to go off with Troilus. But I liked the kind of opposing sides, and while the Doctor's trying not to get involved with history, he's being pushed to his very limit, and he has to, which actually causes one of the biggest events in the Trojan War to actually occur, and that's the fall of Troy. I hope one day we'll be able to get an animation for it, but honestly, the narration is pretty good for this one. The story works really well, so I would highly recommend that one. The Daleks Master Plan. Up next is the fourth serial in the third season, The Daleks Master Plan. This is the longest story in Doctor Who history, spanning over 12 episodes in 5 hours. It was written by Terry Nation and Dennis Spooner, directed by Douglas Camfield and produced by John Wiles. Only episodes 2, 5 and 10 exist in full, with various clips from other episodes still remaining. Halfway through the serial, with episode 7, The Feast of Stephen was aired. It was the first Christmas special for Doctor Who, airing on Christmas Day and having the Doctor directly wish the people at home a very Merry Christmas. It linked back to Mission of the Unknown, following on from the story that was set up. The serial was very much a revolving door of companions and featured the first death of a companion on screen. Katerina, played by Adrian Hill, joined as a replacement for Vicky at the end of The Mythmakers and was herself replaced by Sarah Kingdom, played by Jean Marsh. Sarah and Katerina both died on screen, something that would not be replicated for another 20 or so years. Nicholas Courtney, who would go on to play the Brigadier, also featured in this serial, and the monk would make a return as the first individual returning villain. This serial was the second not to be shown in Australia, as the Australian Broadcasting Corporation considered the serial to be too frightening for children.
Trying to say something.
Well, thank goodness for that.
Now, this one, being a massive 12 episodes long, would take about an hour to summarise properly. So what I'm going to do is try to sum up each episode in a sentence or two, with the promise that if you try and watch or listen to this serial, you will probably enjoy it. So, here we go. Nicholas Courtney's character, Brett, is trying to figure out what happened in Mission to the Unknown when he meets up with Katerina, Stephen and the Doctor. The President of the Solar System, Mavic Chen, promotes peace and safety for everyone, but behind closed doors he is working with the Daleks to sate his power lust. Chen meets up with other leaders in the galaxy working with the Daleks, and Brett and the TARDIS crew stumble upon the Dalek base, finding about Chen in the process. The Doctor invades the evil leader meeting and steals the terrarium, important for their plan, running away in a spaceship with the rest of the crew. In the spaceship, as they are running away, they are attacked by the Daleks and have to land on an abandoned planet to repair. Well landed, a number of convicts invade the spaceship and hold Katerina prisoner until they rescue them from the planet. Realising there is no safe way to save herself and keep the rest of the TARDIS crew alive, Katerina releases an airlock, killing herself and her captor at the same time. When they escaped to a planet of safety at Central City, they find that Chen has sent a soldier, Sarah Kingdom, to kill them. Brett is killed in the struggle, while Stephen, Sarah and the Doctor are accidentally transported to a far distant planet called Mira. The three are forced to team up to keep themselves safe from dangerous invisible creatures, while Chen still chases them to get the terrarium back. While the Daleks and the invisible creatures of Mira fight, the gang escape and hijacks the Dalek ship, returning to the TARDIS on Kemble. The Doctor makes a copy of the terrarium to fool both Chen and the Daleks, but Stephen accidentally hurts himself while trying to help. The Feast of Stephen is the first Christmas episode of Doctor Who. They land in England in the 1960s where the Doctor has to fix the scanner. He gets himself arrested and Stephen and Sarah try to convince the police to release him. It is full of wacky hijinks and fun Christmassy special. Now, back to the original serial, Chen and the Daleks have realised that the terrarium was returned to them was fake, while the TARDIS crew realise that someone is following them. When they land, they realise that the monk is trying to strand them in the same way the Doctor did to him. Trying to shake the monk, the TARDIS reappears in ancient Egypt, where the Egyptians are burying their pharaoh. The monk and the Daleks both appear, causing mayhem in the process. The Doctor loses the terrarium to Chen and the monk gets cast off into space. The TARDIS arrives back in Kemble, with Chen and the Daleks returning with the terrarium. The Daleks double-cross Chen, trapping him and his fellow delegates in a cage until Stephen and Sarah free them, with the caveat that they will warn the rest of the universe. In order to save it, the Doctor tries to destroy the Daleks machine before it can destroy the universe. While Stephen is safe in the TARDIS, the machine is slowly killing Sarah and the Doctor. Sarah is rapidly ageing in front of Stephen, but he manages to save the Doctor from the same fate and watches the planet around him become a barren wasteland. They manage to stop it, but are heartbroken at the cost of it.
We could exterminate you now.
Yes, indeed you could. But then you would never get back the terrarium core, would you now?
The Daleks' Master Plan is one of these episodes or serials that people always tout as being one of the best ever Doctor Who ones. So when they kind of talk about the second Doctor, they always go for the War Games. For the first Doctor, it being the Daleks' Master Plan, I wasn't really sure what to expect going into it. Majority of it is not got the majority of it, but like we've only got 3 episodes, or is it the other way around? I can't remember right now. But quite a lot of it's missing, so you have to listen to the narration. Which again, after the Mythmakers, I actually had high hopes for the narration for this, and it paid off because it really works really well. I think it helps that although there's a bigger strand going over it, and that's obviously the Daleks' invasion and takeover of the world, there's also kind of like mini plots throughout it. So maybe 2 or 3 episodes will be focusing on this, and 2 and 3 episodes will be focusing on this. And then slap bang in the middle of it, you've got the Christmas special, The Feast of Stephen, which has completely got nothing to do with the rest of it. Although it's a long 12 episode run and it's quite hefty, I don't feel like it slogs in the way other serials do, and particularly the Daleks from season 1, I felt slogged a bit because it was a 7-part. Or Marco Polo, I felt slogged a bit. But this, even though it's almost 5 episodes longer than those 2 serials, flowed really, really well. And I do think it was because of those 2 or 3 episode mini plots that were kind of woven into it. I would agree that this is probably the defining serial of William Hartnell's era, because it's got the Daleks and it's got the biggest revolver in terms of amount of companions. It's got the first on-screen death, first 2 on-screen deaths. Nicholas Courtney's in it in a role that's different from the Brigadier, which he would reprise later in the 2nd and 3rd Doctor eras. And then you've got all this kind of amalgamation of the science fiction, and Terry Nation obviously is trying to go out with a bang so that someone will pick up his TV show, and then you've got everything else because kind of throwing out your left, right and centre. The monk comes back as a reoccurring villain. It's just so full of stuff, but it doesn't actually bog it down, it kind of lifts it up. I think that's why, in particular, the Daleks' Master Plan works so well as a serial. The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's. This serial brings us halfway through the season 5 and has the first serial to have a single companion, Stephen. It does, however, show the first appearance of Dodo Chaplet, played by Jackie Lane, although she's only in the last 5 minutes of the last episode. It was written by John Lucarotti and Donald Tosh, directed by Paddy Russell and produced by John Wells. It is made up of 4 25-minute episodes, and Paddy Russell was the first woman to direct a Doctor Who story. All 4 episodes are missing, and there is not a single telesnap or clip surviving from it, with only the audio existing. William Hartnell plays 2 roles in this, the Doctor and the Abbot of Amboise. This is a historical context-heavy serial, surprisingly, which is the first time I had to properly research what was going on politically before I understood half the situations they found themselves in.
My dear Stephen, history sometimes gives us a terrible shock, and that is because we don't quite fully understand. Why should we? After all, we're all too small to realise its final pattern.
The TARDIS arrives in 1572 in Paris, where the Doctor realises that he could go and visit a famous apothecary named Charles Preslin. The Doctor leaves Stephen to explore the world around him, assuming that he cannot get into too much trouble. However, in true companion style, Stephen stumbles into a group of Huguenots plotting numerous political actions, and the serial devolves into a historical retelling of the struggles between the Protestants and the Catholic residents of Paris before the massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve. During the events of the serial, Stephen becomes acquainted with a servant called Anne Chaplet, who join forces with the Huguenots in their plots. Anne works for the Abbot of Amboise, who is currently part of plans to create the massacre and had ran away when she overheard it. The Doctor meets back up with Stephen and they manage to escape during the massacre, while Stephen cannot comprehend why they cannot ensure the safety of Anne by taking her away somewhere. However, the Doctor will not hear of it, convinced he cannot change history away from its designated path. When the TARDIS lands in modern-day London, a young woman named Dorothy Chaplet, or Dodo to her friends, accidentally stumbles into the TARDIS as it disappears. When the TARDIS disappears with Dodo inside of it at the end, it was supposed to be Ian and Barbara watching the ship fade, but due to time constraints it was replaced with a random woman walking her dogs.
I tell you this much, Doctor. Wherever this machine of yours lands next, I'm getting off. If your researches have so little regard for human life, then I want no part.
So after talking up all of the last two serials, which were audio narrations, here's another one where I didn't enjoy this serial at all. I found this the worst of this season, and this season has the Gunfighters in it, which a lot of people don't like, but I just don't like the Massacre that much at all. I started watching it and then we're like, okay, they're talking about history, but there's a point of history that I didn't know much about, especially the Huguenots, Protestant versus Catholic in France. I spent a lot of that serial on Wikipedia while it was on, reading up about the Huguenots and the massacres that took place throughout those years and how the royalty were connected to it and the church and everything, and I found that a lot more fascinating than the serial itself. I appreciated Stephen kind of going off on his own, but other than that, I found it pretty unremarkable and a bit boring. The Ark. The sixth serial, The Ark, was the first Doctor Who serial to directly deal with humanity's future, and the very first to talk about the total destruction of Earth. It was made of 4 25-minute episodes and was groundbreaking at the time for its back-to-front recording sequence that was edited in post-production and its use of forced perspective, an optical illusion to trick the viewer into seeing different depths. It was written by Paul Erickson and Leslie Scott, directed by Michael Emerson and produced by John Wiles. Leslie Scott was also the first woman to have a writing credit on the show. This serial is made up of 2 different parts which can be referenced as 2 different stories that are intertwined, similar to that of other serials such as The Keys of Marinus. It is also the first serial of Season 3 to exist in its entirety, as any other episodes existing previously are part of fragmented serials.
What happens if you get lost?
I catch a bus back.
A bus? What are you talking about?
After picking up Dodo in the TARDIS, it lands in a beautiful tropical rainforest. Dodo, it turns out, has a cold and decides that she should be okay to explore whatever lays outside. After establishing that they are not on Earth, they realise that they are in a spaceship when coming into contact with 2 different creatures, humans and the monoids. They find out that the humans have created an ark to carry them away from Earth, which is dying, to another planet called Rufus 2, and are using the monoids to act as workers for them. The humans show the trio a large statue they have begun to build. Centuries in the future, when they reach their destination, they are due to finish it. However, the monoids, the humans, start to fall deathly ill. The symptoms are a fever, then a cough, before death strikes. The Doctor figures out that because these humans are so advanced, they have wiped out the common cold many centuries before. This means that the current group have no immunity to it, and therefore it is killing them. Stephen also starts to fall ill, and soon the cold has mutated to attack even the trio. However, the Doctor manages to find a cure, and they leave the spacecraft to the unknown with the well wishes of the crew. The TARDIS then materialises back in the same space. When they go outside, nothing has changed, except when they wander around to where the statue was being built. They notice that it has the head of a monoid instead of a human. It has been 700 years since they first left the Ark, and in the meantime, the monoids have taken over and made the humans their workers. The Doctor and his friends have been reduced to a myth around the workers, so when they show up as prisoners of the monoids, the humans gain a bit of morale. When they reach Rufus 2, the monoids wish to colonise it, but do not realise that it's already a pacifist race living there. They're invisible to the humans and monoids. The humans rebel against the monoids, and although the monoids now try and blow the Ark up with the humans on it, they fail, and some of them are destroyed by the invisible Refusians. The monoids, humans and Refusians are then trapped on the new planet, with the knowledge that they have to work together in peace. This time, when the trio leave in the TARDIS, they do not reappear.
They were treated like slaves. And so no wonder when they got the chance, they repaid you in kind.
Now, we're getting back into it with the Ark. The Ark, I felt, was such a fascinating sci-fi premise that I definitely very, very much enjoyed it. So essentially, it's split into two sections. So the first section is in the past, or in the it's still in the future of humanity, but it's in the past in terms of this spaceship. And they arrive, Dodo, who's the new companion, who is great, by the way, much better than Stephen, arrives and she's got a cold, but she actually infects them. But because they're so technologically advanced, they've completely wiped out the cold, so they essentially start dropping. And I found that such a fascinating concept, because quite often in sci-fi or fantasy, they talk about if you go back in the past, you have no immunity to diseases in the past, because obviously we've already eradicated them. But it's almost taking it that going forward, you could be the source of that danger to other people. It was great, and I really loved how it unfolded. And then we come on to the second section of the serial, where they go back 700 years later. It's almost two different stories, but because it's got that thread all the way through those two, it links it in such a brilliant way that it doesn't drag, because obviously it's kind of like 2 episodes each serial almost. So it's very, very short. It's very I think they maybe could have padded out the second half a little bit. I think they probably could have got another episode out of it, but I think it works so well in terms of that mirroring of what can happen in a civilization in 700 years, especially when you're doing something so cruel as exploiting a race that you believe is lower than themselves. And that kind of upheaval, and then at the end having to live in peace despite all the hell that they put each other through for God knows how many years, was fascinating, and I really enjoyed kind of watching it. The Celestial Toymaker. The Celestial Toymaker was going to be it, the episode where producer John Wells finally replaced William Hartnell as the Doctor. However, due to a production team drama that was happening in the background, the original plan was scrapped for a day later. It was made up of 4 25-minute episodes and was written by Ryan Hales. It was directed by Bill Sellers and produced by Innes Lloyd instead of John Wells. Innes Lloyd officially replaced John Wells because of the drama, which led to a minor revamping of the companions in the show. Under Innes Lloyd, companions would be able to have non-BBC English accents and wear modern clothes such as miniskirts. The only remaining episode that exists from this serial is the final test, the last in the quartet. This serial was marred by a number of controversies, with the prominent being the firing of John Wells. After being fired, he overspent the budget for the Ark, meaning that the subsequent episode would be severely lacking in funding. Due to copyright issues over characters and arguments between Wells' script editor Donald Tosh and the new script editor Jerry Davies, the episodes had to be rewritten 3 separate times. Wells was wanting the entire production of Doctor Who to stop instead of his job being given to another.
All the area between the triangles is electric. You'll be killed.
Just before the TARDIS lands, the Doctor sneezes and suddenly finds himself invisible. When they open the door and step outside, they find themselves in a toy room belonging to a mortal entity called the Toymaker. He wants to play the Doctor and his friends in different games, with the caveat that if they lose, they will belong to him forever. While the Doctor plays a single game to win his freedom, his companions play a series of games against the Toymaker's minions, with their prize being the TARDIS. The Doctor has 1,023 moves to win his game, but if he finishes before Dodo and Stephen finish theirs, they all lose. The first game that Dodo and Stephen play is Blind Man's Bluff, where they are pitted against 2 clowns in an obstacle course. The Doctor tries to warn Stephen of the cheating that the clowns are doing, but that backfires when the Toymaker makes them mute. They win the game and continue on to the next. A series of riddles then have to be solved before a set of playing cards solve them first. They win just in time, with the last puzzle being a board game of snakes and ladders, against a petulant boy named Cyril. Cyril tries to cheat, although it doesn't go quite to plan and he ends up destroyed. Dodo and Stephen get to the TARDIS, but the Doctor still has to win his game. With 1 move left, he realises one thing. He can win, but if he wins, then the toy room will disintegrate, killing all of them together. He tricks the game by using his voice to make the last move, dematerialising the TARDIS in the nick of time. They celebrate by eating one of the sweets that Cyril gave the dodo previously, but as he is eating one, the Doctor breaks his tooth.
Only I can win. If I lose, the Doctor and I go down together.
The Celestial Toymaker is an interesting one for me because I always thought that I was going to really love this serial when I ended up watching it. I don't know why. I think I love the character of the Toymaker and all of his expanded universe spin-offs or kind of appearances I've really enjoyed. But I found this one a bit so-so. It was good. It wasn't bad. It was definitely enjoyable, but I don't think it just lived up to my expectations of what this episode was going to be. It was essentially just Dodo and Stephen doing kids' games for 90 minutes while the Doctor ended up being witty and disappearing and only showing his hand, doing some weird games and having riff with the Toymaker. So it was good, it just didn't live up to my expectations, which is probably my own fault for expecting so much of it at that point in time. I look forward to reading more of his expanded universe appearances because I find that that's where I really like his character.
The law's right behind you,
the Gunfighters.
And it won't take long.
The Gunfighters were the 8th serial of season 3 with the first Doctor Who's attempt at creating a western-esque story. It was written by Donald Cotton, directed by Rex Tucker and produced by Innes Lloyd. It was also the first story in which an original song was created for the programme in the form of the Ballad of the Last Chance Saloon, which was sung by Linda Barron of Come Outside fame. At first, the role of Johnny Ringo was offered to Patrick Troughton, although he rejected it on the basis of being too busy at the time. However, this serial was one of the worst received storylines at the time, which convinced Innes Lloyd that pure historicals should be axed. Only 2 more were produced after this one.
In the Last Chance Saloon.
So, our trio land in the wild west, with the Doctor desperate to find a dentist to help his ailing tooth. When exploring their surroundings, they find themselves in Tombstone, where a hunt is on for the famous Doc Holliday. They come across Wyatt Earp, who is the local marshal. Due to a series of misunderstandings, the Doctor is presumed to be Doc Holliday, and while lying in wait for him, the bad guys kidnap Stephen and Dodo and force them to sing a song at a Last Chance Saloon. The Doctor ends up being arrested by the Earps for his own safety, which does not go down too well with Dodo, who is trapped in a room with Doc Holliday and his wife Kate Fisher. Stephen, who is still with the bad guys at this stage, somehow gets wound up planning a jailbreak for the Doctor. When that fails, they decide to try and hang Stephen in his place. Earp intervenes and saves Stephen, and he is reunited with the Doctor, although Dodo is still missing. Stephen tries to go off and find her, but gets wound up with the bad guys once again. With the bad guys on one side and the Earps and Holliday on the other, a classic Old West shootout takes place. The Earps and Holliday win, while the Doctor, Stephen and Dodo escape into the TARDIS and on to their next destination.
Whatever's in your wallet at the last chance, it's your last.
The Gunfighters is a serial which isn't universally loved. It is quite a controversial serial in terms of how good it is. I don't think it's a great serial objectively. Subjectively though, I loved it. It was so chaotic. Like, it's objectively it's pretty bad. It's probably one of the weakest of this season for sure. And it was so bad that Innes Lloyd basically went, okay, we're only doing 2 more historicals after this, but I loved it. It was so chaotic. You've got the song that kind of constantly plays, and it gets to the point that it's so annoying every single time that they switch it on, because it's like the Last Chance Saloon and they just keep playing it and they keep playing it. Oh god, it's absolutely dreadful. And then you've got Dodo going off with Doc Holliday, and then you've got Stephen going off with the bad guys, and you've got the Doctor going off with Wyatt Earp. And my knowledge of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday comes entirely from Wynonna Earp, the TV show. So I literally knew nothing about this, and it was really fun. It was just so chaotic, and then it ended up with like a western shootout at the end, and oh god, it's just chaos incarnate, and it's absolutely brilliant in that respect. Definitely. Oh my gosh, I have fond memories of watching that while a little bit drunk, so maybe that's what did it. The Savages. The Savages was the second last serial of season 3. Hang in there guys, we're nearly done. It was the last episode to feature Stephen Taylor, played by Peter Purves. When William Hartnell was very upset at the leaving of Peter Purves from the cast, as they had grown quite close, but it was not his own choice as his contract was not renewed. In fact, Peirce did not actually want to leave, wanting to continue on and develop Stephen further. It was written by Ian Stuart Black, directed by Christopher Barry and produced by Innes Lloyd, and made of 4 25-minute episodes. It was also the first serial to be completely produced and edited by Innes Lloyd and Jerry Davis after the departure of John Wiles. All 4 of these episodes are currently missing. The story was originally going to be a parable about the apartheid in South Africa, however, this was dropped, although one character was in blackface throughout. Details on the racism behind the practice of blackface is linked in this comments below.
There's something very satisfying in destroying something that's evil, don't you think? Yes! Oh.
The Doctor, Stephen and Dodo land on what seemed like a perfect, idyllic, peaceful world, much to their relief after the previous adventure. They are welcomed into the nearby city, with the residents showing them about very happily. However, Dodo believes that something is not quite right, so she sneaks away to see what is bothering her. She spots that the people of the city are hunting down so-called savages and bringing them into the city in order to sap their life force away, just so they could have unlimited youth and power. Dodo informs the Doctors, who the elders try to control by taking his life force. However, when the leader takes the Doctor's life force, he gains the morals and consciousness that the Doctor lives by. This makes the leader turn against his own people, and at the same time, Stephen and Dodo convince the so-called savages to fight back against their oppressors. They rescue the Doctor, and the life force machine is destroyed. The world is freed from that evil, but society needs to be rebuilt and reunifying 2 groups of people. Stephen, rather reluctantly at first, agrees to stay behind at the request of both groups of people in order to become the new leader and bring everyone into a more prosperous time.
Very well. I will stay. Thank you.
The Savages is a forgettable one for me. I think the only reason why it would stand out is because Stephen leaves. Stephen wasn't entirely my favourite companion at all. He's probably my least favourite of all of one's companions too far. The Savages was a positive for me because Stephen left, but also it's almost very forgettable. I can't even remember if I listened to it on audio or no, I must have listened to it on audio, otherwise it wouldn't be so forgettable. Yeah, I did listen to it on audio. Oh god, that just shows you how forgettable that episode was, because I didn't actually watch it that long ago. It was just very meh, take that as well. The War Machines. And finally we come on to the final serial of the season, The War Machines. It was a final on-screen performance by Jackie Lane as Dodo, and she was replaced by Michael Craze as Ben and Annika Wills as Polly. It was made of 4 25-minute episodes and was written by Ian Stuart Black, directed by Michael Ferguson and produced by Innes Lloyd. Dodo only actually appears in the first 2 episodes of this serial, departing from the TARDIS crew off-screen. Similar to that of Peter Purves, this was due to her contract not being renewed. The story idea was credited to Kip Pedler, where in an interview for a job he was asked what would happen when the state-of-the-art, for the time, Post Office Tower was taken over. Kip Pedler, the science advisor for the show, thought it might have been because an evil-esque computer that controlled telephone lines. This idea was further developed by Ian Stuart Black. So, for the final time this season, let's go over it.
Doctor?
Well, what does it say, my dear?
Got it right. Time and relative dimensions in space.
Good heavens, let me see.
The TARDIS lands in London, 1966. The Post Office Tower has just finished construction, same time it was airing, adding to the air of setting it in the modern day and age. They discover that the scientists in the tower are working towards a new artificial intelligence computer called Wotan. It surprises the Doctor by knowing things that only he should know, such as the acronym for the TARDIS. It is with the scientists that the Doctor and Dodo meet their assistant Polly. While the Doctor is investigating the computer, the girls go out with some of Polly's friends to a bar, where they meet a rather sad sailor called Ben. As it transpires, Wotan has taken over the scientists working on it, and has decided that in order to take over everyone to conform to its will, it needs the Doctor to give it information. In order to do that, Wotan brainwashes Dodo in order to trap the Doctor. The Doctor and Polly realise what is going on and manage to snap her out of it, before sending her into the countryside in order to recover. This is the last time that we see Dodo on screen. Back at the lab, Wotan has taken Polly over, and Ben gets to try and get involved to rescue her. The Doctor, Ben and the army team up to destroy Wotan as it has started manipulating humans to create warships. Ben manages to save Polly, and the Doctor ensures that Wotan is destroyed, saving London in the process. The Doctor bids farewell to the pair, sad about having to travel alone. However, just before they leave, Ben realises that they still have the TARDIS key and run back to give it to the Doctor, sneaking into the TARDIS right before they take off.
Well, there should be when you've got that look on your face. Look, I'll show you.
Is it as bad as that?
The War Machines, I really, really enjoyed this one. We've got the introduction of Ben and Polly and the saying goodbye to Dodo. I felt like Dodo was really hard done. Jackie Lane was really hard done by in this serial. Her exit was taken off completely off screen, and the last thing she was doing is she was possessed and she was trying to give up the Doctor to the War Machines. So she was definitely really hard done by as a character and as an actress. But as for the episode itself, it was great. You've got that kind of artificial intelligence fear sneaking over, which is fascinating watching it from the early 60s point of view, because there's so much of it. There's a bit at the start where they ask questions to it, the Doctor asks questions to it, and basically it kind of responds in a kind of chatty manner, and then it shocks Doctor by knowing questions that it really shouldn't know, and then it kind of parallels to all these artificial intelligence stories where people ask it questions. That it's a great focus to see how really the people's fear of artificial intelligence hasn't gone away, it's even just heightened, but how it was just the same all those years ago, 60 years ago almost. But these stories are just so pervasive and so important that they never really go away. And I think that's what makes this story so good, is that it's an early artificial intelligence terror story. And something also that grounded it back in time is that it took place in the post office tower in London, which when it was released had literally just opened. And in the story it had literally just opened. So for the very first time you've got that extreme groundedness to a story in Doctor Who. This is exactly what it is, and that's exactly when it's happening. Whereas it's always a little bit more either in the future, especially up to this point. It also shows the Doctor working with the army when he's trying to rescue Polly and with Ben. And this was very, very interesting as well, because it shows kind of the seeds for other second Doctor stories, and in particular the whole of the third Doctor's era where he worked with UNIT on Earth almost the entire time. So that, seeing them test the waters to see what would work in future serials is brilliant, because you can see where things worked and that's why they went in that direction, and then where things didn't work and that's why they avoided them, especially with like the historicals. They didn't work with the audience, even though I love them personally. They didn't work with the audience, so that's why they stopped doing them. It's, on the whole, I think it's a pretty good serial.